The bone had 9 cuts, precise, deliberate, right where the meat comes off easiest. Except this wasn't a deer, it was one of us. 1.45 million years ago, Kenya. Before fire, before language, before we were even fully human. And already, we were butchering each other with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it before. We tell ourselves violence is modern, that war came with civilization, that somewhere in our past, we lived in peace. In this video, we'll uncover the oldest murder victim ever found. We'll enter caves where children's bones bear cut marks identical to butchered animals, where human legs became tools and skulls became drinking cups. That shin bone from Kenya is the oldest evidence we have of hominins butchering other hominins. The word hominin might sound clinical, but it just means us and our ancestors, the branch of apes that walked upright. This particular bone probably belonged to someone like Homo erectus, or maybe Paranthropus. We can't know for sure. What we do know is that someone used a sharp stone to slice through the calf muscle, working their way around the bone with 9 separate cuts. Those cuts are exactly where you'd cut if you were butchering any other animal for meat. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They'd done it before, probably hundreds of times, on antelope or zebra, or whatever else they hunted. But this time, the prey walked on 2 legs. The bone also has big cat bite marks. So here's the scene. A hominin is killed, possibly by a predator. Another hominin finds the body and thinks, food. Or maybe they killed their victim themselves, and the cat came later. We'll never know the exact sequence, but we know that 1.45 million years ago, our ancestors looked at other members of their kind and saw meat. This wasn't supposed to happen so early. We used to think cannibalism and interpersonal violence were recent developments, signs of civilization gone wrong, but that shin bone pushes everything back, way back, before fire was common, before sophisticated language, before almost everything we associate with being human. The location matters too. This happened in Africa, the birthplace of humanity. Not in some frozen wasteland where starvation might drive desperate choices, but in the cradle of human evolution, where game was relatively abundant. The choice to butcher another hominin wasn't made from desperation. It was made because it was possible, because the calories were there, because why waste good meat? And that might be the most disturbing part. There's no evidence of ritual here. No signs that this was special or taboo or meaningful in any way. Just practical butchery, one hominin processing another like any other carcass. The banality of it, the normalcy, as if eating your own kind was just another survival strategy in a dangerous world. Fast forward about 1 million years, place, northern Spain, the Sierra de Atapuerca, a landscape of limestone caves that would become one of the most important archaeological sites in human history. Deep in one of these caves is a chamber called Cima de los Huesos, the pit of bones. Getting there isn't easy. You have to crawl through narrow passages, squeeze past rock formations, descend a 13-meter vertical shaft. It's not the kind of place you end up by accident, yet somehow, over 7,000 human bones ended up there, representing at least 28 individuals, all from the same species, Homo heidelbergensis, a muscular, big-brained human ancestor who lived across Europe and Africa. Most of these bones show the normal wear and tear of prehistoric life, but one skull tells a different story. Cranium 17, as the scientists named it, has 2 holes punched through the forehead, not one accidental impact. 2, in nearly the same spot, with the same weapon. Forensic analysis, the same techniques used in modern murder investigations, revealed the truth. The angle of impact, the shape of the fractures, the fact that there are 2 nearly identical wounds. This was intentional. Someone stood face to face with this individual and struck them twice in the head with a weapon, probably a wooden spear or stone hammer. The first blow might have been enough to kill. The second made sure. This happened 430,000 years ago. It's the oldest clear case of murder in the archaeological record, not a hunting accident, not a fall. Murder. The murderer, and we can call them that, had to be from the same group. Homo heidelbergensis lived in small bands, maybe 20-30 individuals. Everyone would have known everyone. This wasn't a stranger killed in a chance encounter. This was someone killing someone they knew. Someone they'd shared food with, hunted alongside, maybe even grew up with. What drives someone to murder in a small group where every individual matters for survival? Jealousy? Revenge? A fight over resources or mates? Or something darker, the simple desire to kill, present even in our ancient ancestors. The pit itself raises questions. Why there? It's not an easy place to access. You don't accidentally drop 28 bodies down a shaft. This was deliberate, planned, maybe even ceremonial. Some researchers think it might be the earliest evidence of funerary practice, a special place for the dead. Others see it as more sinister, a place to dispose of murder victims or outcasts. The truth is probably more complex than either simple explanation. If murder makes us uncomfortable, cannibalism pushes us into territory we'd rather not explore. But the evidence is there, carved into bone, and it tells us that eating other humans wasn't rare. It happened across time, across species, across continents. Take Gran Dolina, another cave in those Spanish hills. Here, 800,000 years ago, lived a species called Homo antecessor. They might have been our direct ancestors, or maybe a cousin branch that died out. Either way, they left behind something disturbing. The remains of at least 22 individuals, mostly children and teenagers, butchered exactly like deer or horses. Cut marks where muscles attached, hammer strikes to crack bones for marrow, scrape marks from removing every bit of flesh. The Spanish team that found these bones didn't want to believe what they were seeing. They ran test after test, compared the marks to those on animal bones from the same site. The conclusion was inescapable. Homo antecessor was eating Homo antecessor, and not just occasionally. It seems to have been a regular practice. The age distribution tells its own dark story. Most of the victims were young, children and adolescents. Why? Maybe they were easier targets. Maybe they came from rival groups, captured in raids, or maybe there was something else going on. Some cultural practice we can't understand. What parent allows their child to be eaten? What society normalizes consuming its young? Unless these weren't their young, unless these were the children of enemies, of others, of the not quite human humans from the next valley over. There was plenty of other food available. The same archaeological layers contain bones from deer, horses, rhinos, bears. This wasn't desperation cannibalism, the kind you might reluctantly understand in a survival situation. This was something else. The lead researcher suggested it might have been territorial, eating your enemies to eliminate competition and get a meal at the same time. Lots of food for low cost, as he put it. Practical, horrifying, human. Jump forward to 45,000 years ago. The Neanderthals are in their final chapters, and in a Belgian cave called Goyet, they're eating each other too. But they're doing something even stranger. They're turning human bones into tools. After stripping the flesh and extracting the marrow, they're taking those empty human femurs and retouching them into scrapers for working animal hides. Think about that. You've just eaten someone, maybe someone from a rival group, maybe someone from your own band who died. And then you look at their leg bone and think, this would make a good tool. It's pragmatic to the point of being disturbing, but it shows us something important. These weren't mindless acts of savagery. They were deliberate, purposeful, integrated into daily life. The evidence for prehistoric cannibalism is everywhere once you start looking. Krapina Cave in Croatia, Molagersi in France, El Cedrón in Spain. Each site tells the same basic story. Human bones processed like animal bones, eaten and discarded. Sometimes in times of hardship, sometimes in times of plenty. Sometimes possibly ritual, sometimes purely practical. At El Cedrón, the evidence is particularly haunting. A family group of Neanderthals, 3 adult males, 3 adult females, 3 teenagers, and 3 children, all killed and eaten at once. DNA analysis revealed they were related. This was a family, and some other group of Neanderthals, slaughtered and consumed them all. The bones show signs of cutting, percussion, and human tooth marks. The killers ate them raw, on the spot, leaving the bones in a heap. Violence requires tools, and our ancestors were innovative when it came to killing each other. The evolution of weapons tells us not just about technology, but about intent, about planning, about the cold calculation required to engineer better ways to end human life. Start simple: rocks and wooden clubs. The murdered individual at Cima de los Huesos was killed with blunt force trauma. Effective, but you have to get close. You have to look your victim in the eye. You have to use tremendous force. It's personal, immediate, and risky. Your intended victim might fight back. By 400,000 years ago, someone had a better idea. At Schöningen in Germany, archaeologists found a series of wooden spears so perfectly crafted they could have been made yesterday. 2 meters long, carved from spruce, balanced like modern javelins. These weren't just sharp sticks. The makers had carefully selected wood with the right density, shaped it to aerodynamic perfection, positioned the weight forward for maximum impact in flight. These spears could kill at distance. You could stand 20, maybe 30 meters away and launch death through the air. For hunting horses and deer, certainly. But the same technology that brings down a horse can bring down a human. And at that distance, you might not even see your victim's face clearly. Killing becomes a little easier, a little less personal. The psychological shift this represents is profound. Close combat killing requires overcoming powerful inhibitions. You feel your victim's struggle, hear their breathing, see the fear in their eyes. Distance weapons remove some of that immediate visceral feedback. They make killing more abstract, more achievable for ordinary people who might balk at crushing someone's skull with a rock. The real revolution came with composite weapons, stone points attached to wooden shafts. The archaeological site of Kathupan in South Africa preserves stone points from 500,000 years ago that show evidence of hafting being attached to spears. But it's in the later periods where we see what these weapons were really capable of. At Jebel Sahaba in Sudan, dated to about 13,000 years ago, we find a cemetery that's essentially a chronicle of violence. Out of 61 bodies, at least 41 show injuries from projectile weapons. But these aren't simple spear wounds. The analysis revealed something chilling. These stone projectiles were designed with multiple cutting edges, specifically engineered to create wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding. The craftsmanship is remarkable and terrible. These weren't hunting points repurposed for human conflict. These were weapons designed to kill people. The makers understood that a smooth puncture wound might heal, but a jagged tear would continue bleeding. They built that knowledge into their tools. Each point was a small masterpiece of lethality, thin enough to penetrate, sharp enough to slice, barbed enough to tear on the way out. Think about the knowledge required here. Someone sat down and thought about how to make their weapons more lethal against other humans. They understood anatomy, blood loss, the difference between a wound that might heal and one that wouldn't. They shared this knowledge, refined it, passed it on, generation after generation, improving the technology of human death. By 10,000 years ago at Nataruk in Kenya, we see the full arsenal deployed: arrows, clubs, spears, and something else. Obsidian, volcanic glass that makes incredibly sharp blades. But here's the thing, obsidian wasn't local to the Nataruk area. The attackers brought it with them from somewhere else. This wasn't a spontaneous fight. This was a planned raid with weapons prepared in advance, carried across the landscape for the specific purpose of killing other humans. The obsidian tells us even more. It's not just that it came from elsewhere, it's that the attackers thought it was worth carrying. Obsidian is fragile. It breaks easily. You don't take it on a long journey unless you have a specific use in mind. These raiders packed their killing tools carefully, protecting them during travel, saving them for the moment of attack. Nataruk gives us something rare in archaeology, a moment frozen in time. Not a burial where bodies were carefully arranged years after death, but a massacre site where people died and were left exactly where they fell. Picture a lagoon shore in what's now West Kenya. 10,000 years ago, a small band of hunter-gatherers, maybe 27 people, have made camp. There are men and women, teenagers, children. At least one woman is visibly pregnant. It's a normal day in the late Stone Age. People are probably preparing food, maintaining tools, watching children play by the water. The lagoon itself would have been an ideal spot. Fresh water, fish, shellfish, birds nesting in the reeds, game animals coming to drink. In this semi-arid landscape, such places were oases of abundance, worth defending, worth taking. Then the attack comes. We don't know exactly how it started. Maybe scouts were spotted and eliminated first. Maybe it was a dawn raid when everyone was sleeping. What we do know is how it ended. Bodies scattered across the landscape. No attempt at burial. Weapons still embedded in bone. A man lies with an obsidian bladelet still lodged in his skull. Another has a similar projectile in his knee. Perhaps he was trying to run when brought down. Multiple individuals show defensive wounds on their arms and hands. the kinds of breaks that happen when you raise your arms to ward off blows. They saw death coming and tried to stop it. One woman's position tells a particularly brutal story. She was in the final stages of pregnancy, her fetus positioned for birth. Her wrists show evidence of being bound. Someone tied up a pregnant woman and then killed her. The level of cruelty is staggering. This wasn't the heat of battle. This was deliberate execution. But here's what makes Nataruk especially chilling. The killing was indiscriminate. Men, women, children, even that pregnant woman, all killed without distinction. 4 adults show signs of having their hands bound, probably with rope or plant fibers that have long since decomposed. They were captured, controlled, then executed. A young child, maybe 6 years old, lay among the dead. Another skeleton belongs to someone barely into their teens. These weren't combatants. They were kids who happened to be in the wrong place when the raiders came. Their small bones bear the same violent signatures as the adults. Blunt force trauma, projectile wounds, no mercy given for age or innocence. This wasn't a battle between warriors. This wasn't even a normal raid where you might kill the men and capture the women and children. This was annihilation, the complete erasure of a group. Why? We can only guess. Maybe it was about resources. The lagoon would have been rich in fish, attracted game, provided fresh water. Maybe it was revenge for some previous conflict. Maybe it was about territory, or women, or some insult we'll never understand. What we know is that 10,000 years ago, one group of humans looked at another and decided they all had to die. And they had the weapons and organization to make it happen. The aftermath is telling too. No one came back to bury the dead. In a world where we have evidence of careful burials going back tens of thousands of years, these bodies were left to rot in the sun. Either the attackers prevented any survivors from returning, or there were no survivors to return. An entire band, an entire social universe, extinguished in minutes. If Nataruk shows us violence at its most raw and practical, Gough's Cave in Britain shows us something perhaps even more disturbing. Violence transformed into art. The cave, used about 14,700 years ago, contained something unprecedented. Yes, there was cannibalism. Men, women, and children butchered and eaten. But this wasn't crude desperation. This was ritual, symbolism, meaning imposed on death. Start with the skull cups, 3 human skulls, carefully crafted into drinking vessels. This wasn't easy. The makers had to remove the facial bones, clean out the brain, then precisely shape the cranium into a functional container. It's delicate work requiring skill and patience. You don't go to that trouble in a famine. You do it because the object means something. The process was methodical. First, the soft tissues were removed. Eyes, tongue, and facial muscles carefully cut away. The lower jaw was detached. Then came the delicate part, shaping the cranium without shattering it. Using stone tools, the crafters knocked away pieces of bone in a controlled spiral pattern, gradually forming a smooth rim. One mistake and the whole skull would crack, ruining hours of work. The bones tell the story of the process. First, the bodies were dismembered and defleshed with stone tools. Cut marks show systematic removal of every scrap of meat. Then, the long bones were cracked for marrow, just like you'd process a deer. But then something strange happens. After all the flesh was removed from one forearm bone, someone carefully engraved it with a zigzag pattern. They butchered a human, ate the flesh, then decorated the bone. The engraving wasn't random. It's a controlled pattern, a series of parallel lines creating a zigzag motif. It would have taken time, concentration, artistic intent. This wasn't doodling on a leftover bone. This was the creation of an object with meaning. Maybe it was a trophy. Maybe it was a ritual item. Maybe it was something we can't even conceive of with our modern minds. This suggests the cannibalism at Gough's Cave wasn't just about calories. It was about something we can only guess at: power, ritual, the transformation of enemies into objects. The skull cups might have been trophies. They might have been sacred objects. They might have been a way of capturing the essence or power of the dead. We'll never know the belief system behind them, but we know that 15,000 years ago, humans weren't just killing and eating each other. They were making it meaningful. The selection of victims might not have been random either. Isotope analysis of the bones suggests the consumed individuals had a slightly different diet than typical for the area. They might have been from another group, outsiders captured or killed in conflict. The cannibalism might have been a way of demonstrating dominance, of literally consuming your enemies. Or it might have been something else entirely, a religious practice, an honor given to the dead, a belief that consuming human flesh granted power or knowledge.